I'll let you take the bill.
All right, Abra, once the panelists get settled, I think we're going to be ready to start whenever you are.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. Well, folks here in person are still trickling back into the room, but good day again to all of our virtual attendees. Take that off for a second. So we are coming off some great breakout sessions. I do see some folks still coming in the room, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm really pleased. Those of you who've worked with me at all know that over the years, we've partnered with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. And it's really just been a pleasure to work with them on this critically important topic of improving school readiness and education success for some of our youngest learners. I'm even more pleased that over the last year or so, the campaign has recognized and intentionally added housing to their strategic plan and housers to their list of essential partners, both for their own work, but also when making recommendations to others. And this, I think, is really just such a rich example of how to be a partner in this space. It was also the campaign's influence that added housing as an essential component to this year's All America City Awards. You'll hear more about that in just a minute from Ralph, but there's also more information in your folder. And I'm so excited to extend a special congratulations to all of the CLAFA members who are involved in finalist applications. It was almost half of all of the finalists included CLAFA member housing authorities. So really fantastic. This year, we also worked with the campaign to produce a webinar series showcasing powerful housing education partnerships, and it's culminating in today's plenary session. In a moment, you'll hear from the campaign, as well as the Housing Authority of Kansas City and Turn the Page KC, an education nonprofit. Turn the Page is intentionally investing in neighborhoods through its mission to support early literacy and early school success, just as HAKC and PHAs across the country have deep ties within and among the communities in which they serve. Both Turn the Page and HAKC see the importance of two-generation approaches. You can also check out a publication we did on two-gen approaches and examples by the registration table. I know many of you have been with us at the summit since we started. So some of you remember, excuse me, our description of partners as a dating game. So often we end up focusing on and featuring the long-time marriages, the folks who've been doing this for a while. And I'm really excited that today's plenary will give you a peek into the early dating days of the burgeoning partnership happening in Kansas City. I think that this is a unique opportunity to really see two entities at the start of their work together. And I hope that it'll spark ideas and connections for you in your own community relationships. Please join me in helping to welcome our panel.
Good morning.
Do you need help?
Does this work?
Yes.
Now it works, yes. I'm delighted to be here this morning and to reconnect with many of you. Abra and I were commenting that we missed each other in 2019. And you know, once you say that we missed each other in 2019, you realize we haven't seen each other for 3 full years. And so it's like a family reunion in a way, and I'm delighted to be here with you. And the first person I saw when I walked in the door was Preston Prince. And I'm really delighted that I saw Preston because with Preston here, I can tell the truth about why the campaign for grade level reading actually is paying attention to public housing. I would love to say that it was because we knew it was the right thing to do from the beginning. That is the way we will write it. But when we write that, look for it in the fiction section of your library and local bookstore. We did not. And in 2012, when we first joined with the National Civic League to recognize the cities across the country that were paying attention to early school success as measured by grade level reading and lifting up school readiness, school attendance, and summer learning. We had some guests at our initial planning meeting, and the guests were senior executives from the public housing community, led by none other than Preston Prince. And in what at the time seemed to be a major, polite but fairly significant disruption, because we had an agenda and the agenda did not include a presentation or a conversation about public housing. The leaders of the public housing community and that Housing and Education Committee really made the case to us that we were doing what so many others had done and not recognize that families in public housing constituted a neighborhood, a community, a population worthy of attention and inclusion in our planning. And I must say, it's one of the most important things that happened to the campaign. And over the past 10 years, we have tried to be worthy of the moment that was created by the leaders of the public housing community. We have, in our work as a campaign, come to 3 propositions, and let me just share quickly those propositions. And I think there's a slide. There's a slide around it. The first thing, next slide. The first thing, we've come to recognize that no matter how much we work in and with schools, that for a large number of children, especially children from economically fragile and marginalized families, those kids, in order to succeed, will need systems of care and services and supports that are 24/7, 365, and multi-generational. We cannot get there without paying attention to housing. Schools are not 24, they're not 7/7, they're not 365, and many are multi-generational only under duress. We've also come to understand, in a way we did not quite at the beginning of the campaign, that parents are co-producers of good outcomes for their children, and they are essential partners in supporting their children in the early years and the early grades. And that realization also brings us back to housing. And so for us, this notion of meeting children and families where they are is literally and figuratively true. That's what we try to do. And as the next slide will show, that we are a coalition of the willing. You know, we don't have the resources, we don't have the energy to go out and spend a lot of time persuading people. We mobilize folks, but we try not to persuade the unwilling when we have in front of us, as was demonstrated by the housing executives in 2012. We have a large number of folks who are willing. And when we look at the participation of public housing authorities and housing leaders in every phase of this work, we think we've got good reason to be pleased. We've got great partners. There's good work to do, and I think we can meet the moment. And as we have gone back with the National Civic League this year, once again, we're partnering with the National Civic League. And this year, the topic is directly. So, in a decade, we've gone from being reminded that we had to even think about housing to now where housing is at the center of the work. And housing as platform, we have tried to encourage and support and celebrate the work that's being done across the country already to make sure that we all see housing as the essential aspect of getting kids that 24/7, 365 multi-generational system of services and support that they're going to need to succeed and to prevail. And when you look at the list of communities, you will see on that list Kansas City, Missouri. And that's why I am so pleased that it worked out. It really did. This was not planned. That list was being, that nobody will ever believe that, but that list was being developed separately from this program. And I'm delighted to have folks here this morning talking to us about what's going on in Kansas City. And as Abra said, I'm really delighted that what we have is not that fully formed partnership that we all could look at and wish we could get there. What we have, and I love this dating just metaphor, there's a lot there. What we have is an opportunity to see and hear about a partnership that is in formation, that is in its early stages of development, that's confronting the startup challenges, the get momentum challenges, and taking advantage of opportunities presented. And I'm going to ask Ed and Kristen to talk a bit about that work, and then we'll have a conversation among us. Ed, are you first?
Oh, I can go
I'm
first.
so sorry, real quick for our panelists. Can we please ask that you make sure you hold your mic close to your mouth, just so the virtual people can hear you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, and you probably couldn't hear me, so the interruption is welcome.
Good morning. I'm Ed Lowndes. I'm the executive director for the Housing Authority in Kansas City, Missouri, and very pleased and proud to be here today. And for the entire housing is aspect, the collaboration aspects of housing is what's so important. That's what kind of brought us here in this particular aspect. As Ralph, you were talking about, and you're identifying the multi-generational aspect. And this came up in one of the previous panels that, we often are thought of as just the people that provide housing. But a larger part of our mission is how do we help those families be successful and not need us? And equally in that, and this is the multi-generational aspect of it, is so their children don't become multi-generational people living in public housing or assisted housing, that they can be successful. And as you pointed out, it's, reading and the ability to read, to the ability to participate, to have, more than just functional literacy is so important for those those individuals, those young individuals particularly, to be successful. So it's the partnerships that we have to have, because I mean, we're not the experts in that, or they are the experts in the housing side, but we have to create the partnerships and develop those partnerships so that the families that we serve are part of the community and can realize their ability to be successful. And that's where these connections really come into play.
Sure, thank you. I'm Kristen Droege. I'm the executive director of Turn the Page KC. And I don't know if it's possible, but our monitor went out in front of us. Is that possible to get that back? But I'll just share a little bit with you about both our organization and the initiative that began what apparently our dating.
The dating game.
Yeah, the dating game, right. So Turn the Page KC is a small nonprofit in Kansas City, Missouri that was started in about 2011 by our former mayor, Sly James, to address the fact that third grade reading proficiency in our area is well below the state average, and Missouri's state average is also not where we would like to see it. So being half of that is a frightening concept. And really thinking about how we could support that, we were designed to be what's referred to as a collective impact organization. We are not a service provider per se, but we work to coordinate the services of many different agencies and organizations in our city. Thanks. Thank you. Our mission really is to see all children and in fact, all residents of our city have the reading skills they need to be successful in life. And we hope to do that by mobilizing the entire community. And we have always conceptualized ourselves as the focus on how we support reading all around our schools. Now more than ever, schools cannot do this alone. They cannot be the sole source of literacy learning in our children's lives. And so we have developed 4 strategic priorities to support literacy and learning around the schools. We do that by focusing on access to quality early childhood learning opportunities, by combating chronic absenteeism so that children are in school to learn, by addressing access to quality out of school time learning, which is after school, summers and holidays, making sure that all time is rich with language. And then ensuring access to inclusive books that mirror the children who are reading them, introduce things that are different to the children who are reading them, and really support social emotional learning and the skills that children are working on and developing along with their literacy. But we recognized, particularly after the 2-year COVID impact on our schooling, that if we really want to support language and literacy around the schools, we must be addressing the most powerful source of that, and that is the family and the home. We know that all children are able to learn to read, and we know that their first teacher of that is the family. Whether that's the parents or the siblings or their caregivers in their home, and that the first partner to those families is their community or their neighborhood. And so we really have been reshaping how we approach our support process. And for the last 6 months, we've been focused on a program called Read 360, which is an approach to really starting at the neighborhood level, one neighborhood at a time, and bringing together the individuals in that neighborhood to form a literacy community. We do that, and we will begin doing that in July, which is why we're here today to talk about those beginning stages, by selecting a community that wants to partner with us. It's really important to us that we aren't there to force something upon a neighborhood, but that they are informed about the opportunity and they make the choice to take part in it. And by focusing on the neighborhood communities around Kansas City that include our housing authority communities as well. So in order to move this forward with a community once the partnership is begun. We are forming a literacy council in each neighborhood, and we are imagining at this point that will be 10 to 20 engaged adults who are interested in taking part in this process with us as the leaders in their community. There will be compensation for those adults for the time that they're putting in. And we will really be working to elevate their voices and their connections to their community so that they can bring to our attention what they see as the challenges that get in the way of children achieving childhood literacy and success in school, the obstacles that they have to overcome in their parenting to help assure that, and also to build and share out their vision of the community that will best serve their children in their process toward literacy development. Next slide or two. And again, and one more. As I said, we are part of the Collective Impact Forum, and we hold their principles very dear as we plan what we do. In particular, with this program, we are making sure that we are always focused on equity, on shared leadership, on developing the leadership, and thus the sustainability of the programming within the neighborhoods. And in particular, the one that I think always stands out to me is the focus on focusing on the local context. I think it's very easy to look at the city as a whole, but Kansas City, like most cities that you're all from, I'm sure, is very complicated, very diverse, and neighborhood by neighborhood, you're really encountering very different cultural groups, language speakers, needs, wishes, and visions. And so we really want to make sure that our work with a neighborhood is focused on the families in it and what they're seeing and telling us about. Next slide. Again. Great. So yes, I've spoken to this. So we will begin by forming this literacy council. We will be making a 3-year commitment to each neighborhood. And we're in the process now of designing what we're calling the arc of engagement for that literacy council, where we will begin in the first year with really focusing on building trust, building relationship, and building voice, so that they are capable together as a team to bring in the views of their neighbors and friends and among their neighborhood and create that shared vision. In years 2 and 3, we will be focusing on literacy development and literacy obstacles, and then on ongoing leadership and sustainability. We will be introducing new neighborhoods to our group of communities every 6 months. And it's our goal that literacy councils from an exiting neighborhood will become the mentors for literacy councils down the line, so that learning is shared, both to elevate the power of what they have done, and also to make it more authentic to the incoming literacy communities and councils, that this is focused really on the people of the community and not on the service agencies. You can go ahead. And then as we do this work, we will be functioning as the coordinator of services, sort of the backbone of the team. And we will partner with a variety of agencies across Kansas City. The work that's done directly with the Literacy Council will be done by a service agency that is based already in that neighborhood community, so that they have roots deep in the neighborhood and really know the community well, and partner with the housing authority that has housing in that community as well. So that will be our sort of front-facing team on the ground. But we are also developing educational partners, civic partners, health partners from across sector, and in particular, really building up a a set of business partners of local businesses who really want to be a support, but have no idea how to do that. And I know that there are many examples of that happening around the country in terms of barbershops that want to be supports for literacy, turning laundromats into family literacy sites, really using the community to strengthen the school system by engaging children outside of school in literacy learning. Next slide. And then, of course, our other commitment to the neighborhood is that each year of their partnership with us, we will be the host for a festival of reading that they design and help celebrate the accomplishments that they've had. And the last slide, please. I think the part that really, last slide, thank you. The part that really excites me is that in the 6 months we've been rolling this out, we've had over 25 agencies who can't wait to take part in this with us. It has been the easiest sell of my life to say, do you want to help us figure this out? And the answer is always yes. How do we help you? And that ranges across all sectors that I've talked to, and this list continues to grow. In particular, one that I think is critically important, it's not even up here yet, is our local university, UMKC, has a Center for Urban Education Research, and they are partnering with us to ensure that not only are we using data effectively, but that we're sharing it with all of the partners so that this doesn't become another silo of lots of little agencies collecting data, but that we can begin to really put it all together into a bigger picture view. So I think I've gone over my time. Thank you.
Ed, let me ask you 2 questions. Sure. One, if you had brought somebody with you, either from around that table or within your agency, who would you have brought?
Well, in addition to Kristen,
Kristen.
A couple of people coming to, that we have a great relationship with Literacy KC, a not-for-profit organization that actually will take, that's one of the on-the-ground organizations that is working and identifying the needs of the individuals, making sure they're at the table, because they're going to be a key component in implementing the program. The other is our resident leadership, the spokespeople for the residents that actually live in public housing. One, because they bring that perspective of their living environment, which is different than other parts of the community, if for no other reason is the way they're viewed by the other parts of the community as a whole. So having them at the table is extremely important. But those are the 2 most important ones that I can see: a service provider and then the residents themselves.
Kristen, who would you brought?
I think for me, one of the critical partnerships, in addition to the Housing Authority, has been that service provider in the area. We've already identified the neighborhood area that we're going to begin working with, and there's an organization called Maddie Roads that has been, gosh, it's hard to even define service because they touch everything in the lives of this community. And the minute I talk to neighborhood members that's going to be the front-facing organization, you can just see them go, oh, wonderful. No, we know them, they know us. So that beginning piece, I think, is critically important. The other piece that I would have brought is this data aspect. My background's in social science research, and there is so little out there that we can put together that creates a data set that's really meaningful when what you're having to do is tap into the same people over and over to get that information. So the ability to really thoughtfully prepare and share data over time, so all kinds of different service agencies have access to really helpful insights and can guide their work with it. That's really powerful to me.
Let me ask for that, the last slide to go up from my short deck. this reminds me, by the way, this is a true story. There's always a technology glitch, no matter how many times you rehearse it. And now that we've all been on Zoom for 2 years, we know that. But this old story about President Clinton delivering the State of the Union and the teleprompter going down and him not missing a beat continued with the entire State of the Union address, and nobody knows when it came back up or if it came back up. Well, in this way, the three of us are sitting here, and all three of us have spoken without this damn thing many times, right? But you know how you instantly become dependent on it. And there's this moment of panic when you're looking at the dark screen, like, what do I do now? And you see us like looking around, and we're basically reinventing a presentation that we would have given had we not been dependent on the screen. So I'm like, what did I want to say? So what I wanted to say right now is on the screen, and hopefully for those of you on Zoom, you can see it. We tried to look at the work for the last decade, and we distilled what we think are some success factors and say, who are the people who seem to be getting it right? And what do they have in common? And Kristen, you're bringing up data sort of triggered this, because what we are seeing is that one of the things they have in common is that they've taken seriously the need to pay attention to data and to try to solve the tricky problems of sharing data, disaggregating data, and analyzing data.
You need to hold it closer.
Oh, am I getting a message? Okay, thanks for the reminder. Thanks for the reminder. So this data thing has been tricky. Tell us a little bit about how you're approaching it in Kansas City.
Me? Well, like we're at the beginning here. So, I mean, the first step was to reach out to the experts in thinking about large, complex systems of data. And that's why I went directly to the university first. But for me, particularly having a background in education and working with nonprofits predominantly, like the one that Ed mentioned, literacy-focused nonprofits, so often we're guided only by the end-of-year outcome assessments for reading proficiency, which is the sort of it's too late point. You know, if we all know that third grade reading proficiency is as powerful as we know it is in predicting future success, we can't wait till they're in third grade taking that test to determine what to do. We need data.
Let me interrupt you to ask you, how about the sharing of data? Because for a whole lot of us, we don't get to the good stuff because the first barrier is people sometimes aren't sharing data. You know, data moves at the speed of trust. And there are a lot of people who aren't sharing data, so you never get to know something about the quality. And what do you find in that?
Oh, that's very true. Whether it's sharing data or trying to get information from schools or that and back and forth, everyone, the first thing that you hear, and we've all heard it, is, oh, that's confidential. I can't share that. The easiest way to overcome that is it's confidential. The person that owns the confidentiality are the parents. So the parents can sign off saying, I approve of you sharing all my data between all these organizations. And that's part of how we are going to be able to gather the data. So instead of sharing it through the bureaucratic systems, it's sharing it through the family systems.
And I think that goes directly back to developing that trust in that relationship, because I think that there are a lot of parents who very rightly don't trust to share their children's data. What's that going to be used for? How's that going to reflect? How will that limit opportunity? And so ensuring that they understand confidentiality, that that data doesn't have to identify an individual child to be shared. And those are big thoughts that really aren't on a parent's mind most of the time. So finding the ways to communicate that and to get that comfort level will be the first step.
Now I want to point out what might be an irony here, and goes back to this notion that data moves at the speed of trust. In part because the institutions don't trust each other. And your workaround that is to say, well, let's realize the data owned by parents. And so we're gonna go through parents because they're a hell of a lot easier than that institution over there who doesn't trust me and I don't trust them.
Mhm.
But then we come right back to it. Do the parents trust us? And so we haven't avoided trust. We've just, in many respects, shifted the burden now of trust to the relationship between the housing authority or turn the page KC and the parents. And that's deeply ironic, but also potentially promising because it tells us the work we have to do.
Absolutely. It's definitely more promising because while as the housing authority, we are, the landlord. And of course, being in public housing, it's also more than just a landlord. It's the bureaucracy. It's, having to go through annual recertifications and a lot of other process. But we have our companion department of our resident services that are, at times literally knocking on doors saying, how are you doing? It is about relationship building. And so our staff has that relationship with the families, everything from, the way we have it set up that if a family is facing eviction or other lease issues, the first person we call is our resident services department saying, do we have a provider out there that can help this family be compliant? And the families recognize that we're there to help them keep their housing. That's the first factor in that trust. We're not here to get rid of you. We're here to help. And not the proverbial, I'm from the government, we're here to help, but we want to know you and help you be successful. That trust factor, overcoming that. Then the second factor is, now that you trust us, let me introduce you to someone else who also you should trust.
And I think that extends then to the trust and relationships built between all these partners. We're bringing together now. Whenever you talk about cross sector, you're talking about introducing, organizational leaders to people they've never worked with before or areas they don't really fully understand. Excuse me. And one of the things that I think has been important is in thinking about, sharing data. Everyone's ears perk up. How can I be part of that? How can I be part of that? And one of the conversations we've begun is with some of the local donors, some of our foundations and funders around, rather than funding each of us to have a piece of our funding go to someone to do the data analysis for us, why don't you support the shared data process for the city and make that a component of, if you're granting my organization, grant me access to that along with funds and make that an integral part of all of the work that they're doing. And so it does really become this huge systemic process of bringing people together.
If I didn't ask you who you would have brought, but let's assume you would have brought one of your school superintendents. How would the school superintendent respond based on your current experience to the data question?
I think quite well. We have an amazing superintendent at Kansas City Public School District. Dr. Mark Bedell has been there for about 7 years now. And he has really turned that around. We're working with several agencies within the district already in our partnerships. But he has been saying, one of the phrases you hear him say all the time is, we cannot do this alone. And that's become a bit of a mantra for most of the nonprofits in Kansas City. And I think that is why, especially now, after the 2 years of COVID, everybody owns that in a big way. We cannot be successful by ourselves. This must be a partnership process. So there's a little bit of this point in time that we're trying to capture right now, where rather than sort of sinking into the mire of, oh my gosh, everything is even worse than it was before. Instead, looking at it like this is an opportunity. You know, we're all poised and ready to go out and make this work in a different way than we used to. I think that our superintendent would support the idea, and then we would tackle FERPA and HIPAA and all of the complications of data sharing. But I think everyone's ready to tackle that.
And you say you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I think the superintendent that we have would be one of the first people at the table because he recognizes value of education. He wouldn't be the superintendent if he did not. But he also sees the need for all the looking at the students holistically. It's not just about the classroom, or as you said, it is 24/7, 365. Their role is here, but education is equally important in the home and in the community. And that's part of his mantra as well. Back to what Kristen was saying, we can't do it alone because education is 24/7, 365.
You know, one of the things we've discovered is this role of the local funders. And we sometimes call it more than money philanthropy, where they're providing not just a check, but they're also providing access to the networks, access to their expertise, and leading and being influential. And it sounds to me as if this plan incorporates your local funders playing that multifaceted and active role.
Absolutely. I think one of the good things about the neighborhood that is targeted is our Choice Neighborhood Initiative neighborhood. So we have an infrastructure already of combining the public housing area with the community as a whole, but the multitude of service providers out there, not just strictly funders, although one of our primary partners that we have is the United Way of Kansas City. So in a way, they're a funder, but they're also a convener of the other social service partners. So you're looking at this holistically from all the different aspects. So it is a key component of it.
You want to say, finish that thought you have about the role the funders are playing?
Well, I do think that
And what you're nudging them towards.
Sure. I do think that Kansas City is somewhat unique in that so many of our foundations and funders are deeply rooted in, family successes that grew out of Kansas City and very committed to giving back and really rallied in very different ways over the last 2 years to make sure that their funding went where it was needed in a very different set of circumstances. And Turn the Page had the opportunity to work with them on some of those processes to make sure funding was created to create safe learning sites where children could do their learning. So I think, again, it's a little bit of a moment in time where we can do a little bit of that pushing to help them recognize, what are the common elements that they could fund that would develop longer term systems of support for the service agencies that they're partnering with.
We've got 15 minutes left to go, I think. And I want to make sure that we hear a bit from the folks who are listening. And I know doing these hybrid sessions are really, really tough. So I'm going to propose two things. For the people who are on Zoom, if you could write your question or comment into the chat, it will give me an excuse and opportunity, and I will call it an obligation, but I want to go to Kansas City anyway. And so I promise that if you put your question and comment into the chat, I'm going to find some time to sit with Ed and Kristen, and we're going to try to fashion responses. Sure. Deal?
Absolutely.
Okay, look at it. For those of you in the room, you know what happens when we get to the question and answer? They're like 3 long questions, 3 answers, and we're done. So, and then you have to pretend that the comment is a question. So let me ask you for half the time we have, don't pretend that the comment is a question. If you've got a comment and you can get it into 60 seconds, make the comment, and we'll listen to listen to the comment. If you got a question, ask a question. We'll listen. We'll take about 10 minutes for that, and then Ed and Kristen will make some wrap-ups that will be as responsive as we can to the comments and questions raised. So this is your shot to put some things on the table based on what you've heard so far and what you would have liked to ask if we had 3 more hours.
And Ralph, I'm able to read out some of the questions and comments in the virtual chat if we get any. So I can read those out for you. But if we have any in-person questions?
Great. Questions, comments?
One back. We got one back in the corner.
We got one back here. Can we run a mic back to this corner?
I was wondering what interventions you saw moving the dial the most, or do you have any sense of that in terms of your interventions in Kansas City?
Specific to this program?
Yes.
No, because this has not officially started yet. We've set July as our kickoff date. But I think the only thing that I'm seeing moving the dial is this outreach for partnership. I think it's actually beginning to change the way some of the organizations think about the service they provide. I've had, when we talk about Literacy KC, or there's another called the Literacy Lab, they each have a very specialized set of services they provide. One, for instance, is an in-school tutoring program that's part of a national network and uses AmeriCorps Vista volunteers or paid Vista members. And they've already begun thinking about how they can shift that out of the classroom, out of the school building, to serve in a community setting for families whose school may not be able to afford that service, but they still would like it in the community. So really just thinking about how we can adapt and change and stay very agile in response to whatever we learn and hear from the community members.
Ed, I know this is early, but who do you want to learn from? I mean, what have you seen around the country that you are going to, whether you can sneak it in or walk it in to Kansas City?
I'll connect it to the session that was immediately before in this room, and that was the relationship between housing authorities and libraries. And I think that is particularly in what's going on in Cleveland, and how that relationship is a strong relationship. It's not just about traditional libraries. It's the totality of everything they have. And it's building on that to bring, I think, the ultimate aspect of what we want to look at is we have to look at the families holistically. You can't look at it in silos. You can't look at it in little pieces. You have to look at it in its totality, and those are the types of successes. The other area that I think we love to focus on is what we see in our moving to work agencies across the country, and the innovation that they're able to put into and bring those partnerships in, where they're now looking at the families holistically, of housing being the foundation. You cannot have education, successful employment, successful health, if you don't have quality housing. So it is bringing those best practices into Kansas City as well as our total community.
Kristen, a number of us have been looking at Turn the Page KC for some time. In fact, folks in St. Louis have called their initiative, and they're doing great work, but they're not the only ones looking at Turn the Page KC. For the rest of us who've been sneaking a peek and being kind of like, we wish we were there, how do we learn from you and with you as you enter this new piece of work? What should we do that would allow us to see, to learn, maybe to replicate?
Thank you. And I think I would point to sort of two factors that I try and keep in my mind all the time is one, I find the being in partnership or being a participant in the collective impact forum is phenomenally helpful. It just refocuses and recenters us on the type of work we're here to do. I think it's very easy in a role like ours to have that sort of mission drift that you hear about, because everything we encounter is so worthy of being addressed, and trying to really maintain that role as the coordinator of others, the convener of others, bringing folks together. So that's one. And then the other is the word that I use continually in all my work is agility. We are a very small organization. We are sometimes, unfortunately, small, but a very small organization. But it allows us to be agile, and with an eye on that clear mission. How we get there needs to be able to change all the time. So you just have to be able to. And I heard this in the session I went to, which was the one across the hall, from an organization called Community Builders that I want to learn a great deal more from, to stay agile and be ready to admit that you don't know, and learn, and put your agenda aside and learn from your partners, learn from residents, learn from the community, but always with that long-term vision. And I learned a phrase from a colleague years ago that's, the mistake of 5 degrees, where, we're moving down a path and we know we're going to veer off that path. There are going to be obstacles, but you have to recorrect, and make sure that you don't just go a little off, because down the line, that 5-degree mistake will take you way off from your mission goal. So that continual focus and realignment, it has to really be almost daily.
I think kind of piggybacking on that, what Kristen was saying, the agility aspect, and going back to the beginning of our conversation, we're at the beginning stages of developing this. And that agility, I think, is so important that the Turn the Page did not come in with a prepackaged, here's what we're going to do. It came in with the question, what needs to be done? Which includes where are we at? Who are we serving? And in the particular neighborhood that we're talking about, just on the public housing side, we're talking probably roughly 200 individuals that are between age 0 to 8. So you have a population there, but what do they need? And we're in the question standpoint that forms the development standpoint that then sets the ultimate goals that we can achieve. So that whole agility aspect runs all the way through it. I think too often we get, here's the package, replicate it. It's like, but that's not what we have here. And so we've started off really in the intentional planning aspect of it.
As a result of the pandemic, we've got a lot more kids stranded on the wrong side of the achievement and opportunity gap, stranded on the wrong side of an even larger achievement and opportunity gap. What would you put at the top of the list to get done if we're going to take on the challenge and the opportunity presented by the pandemic?
Well, for me, it goes right back to the family. I think it's very easy to sit in a sort of an academic chair and say, oh, well, the critical part is kindergarten readiness. The critical part is 3rd grade reading. The critical part is, transition to college and career. There are so many critical parts, but one thing I learned, but prior to this, my whole career was in school leadership. And one thing I learned is, you can't set up a program, or you can't set up even a school that serves only a small piece of the puzzle, because every parent you talk to has multiple children at multiple stages in their life, and they care about all of them succeeding. And so we can't go in and say, this is about kindergarten readiness, this is about early childhood, because the same families with infants have 5th graders and high school students, and they're not going to focus all their time on one child. And so that for me was why it was critical to get a set of partners that could address all kinds of different things. And so I think the critical piece for me is putting the family in the middle, and making sure that we're all poised to listen and to really learn, what needs to change, what needs to happen.
I think well, in a word, connectivity. We've heard it a number of times during our sessions today, but it fits in with equity and inclusion. The families that we serve, they can't have equity if they're not included, and they can't be included if they can't connect. In other words, we got to bring them into the 21st century, that not just from the building standpoint, but the hardware access, the usability access, and that's not just the kids, it's the families too. I mean, textbooks are now online. They're not hard copies. So if the parent doesn't know how to access their student records, their student achievements, or even their student curriculum, then they're going to be, that student's going to fall behind. So it's the totality of that connectivity and education aspects.
Let me just check to see whether there are any thoughts, questions, comments. Please.
Give yourself one virtual comment. Angela DeWild says, hi, Ed and Kristen. Angela here from KC. I second this presentation. Great things are happening in KC. So just a shout out to Kansas City folks.
Right.
Thank you, Angela.
Sonia Zaderman, CLAFA. I know you're in the early stages. This is a very exciting panel. Let's start with that. How do you define success? So you may have different measures of success based on the stages you're in, but could you talk a little bit about when do you start talking about what is success? Is that the beginning or the middle? And how does that change over time?
I think it's critical that we have multiple stages and that we're aware of that all along the way. I think too often we put everything on the end point, and don't think about what successes have to happen to get us there. And then the other piece of that is, keep agility in mind. We may have an idea of 6 stages at which we need to see X, Y, or Z to feel that we're successful or to know that we're on the right path. But when we get to the first one, that second one may need to shift and adjust. So keeping that agility in mind. Ultimately, in the long term, our idea of success is that we're raising the 3rd grade proficiency in Kansas City. We would like to see Kansas City match the state average, and we'd like the state average to increase. So that's a big goal.
I'm a law professor. Come on, let me push you on that. 2 years from now, how would you know you're on track? What would success look like if you just had the increment of time with 2 years? Understanding that this is a generational issue, but what would we expect in 2 years? What would you expect?
I would expect to see 4 learning communities engaged. I would expect to see that we're seeing patterns of literacy councils who stay engaged across year to year, and that we're seeing at least one indicator in each community that's been identified as an obstacle that's being addressed.
See, I knew she had a better answer for that question. Ed, you get the last word.
No, I agree. I think it's setting some short-term goals with that long-term goal, but the biggest lift and probably one of the most complicated short-term goals is going to be the community involvement. And when I say community, it's not just the public housing community, it's the full community. This is not a public housing program. This is a community, a neighborhood. And that goes back to my comment when we're talking about the Choice Neighborhood Initiative. It is not the apartment complex that it's focused on. It is the neighbors in the single family homes, the other apartments, the public housing that are all coming together with one objective, that the entire neighborhood is working on literacy and achievement together.
We'll take that as the last word. And let me ask you to join me in thanking our panelists, and then we're going to KC. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. That was really great. And we all look forward to hearing about where things go in KC. We are moving into lunch. So if you are joining us virtually, we will be back at, sorry, I have the wrong page of the agenda in front of me. I think it's 1:30. 1:30? Okay, yes. So we will be back at 1:30 if you're joining us via Zoom. So please stretch, get something to eat, chat online with your fellow virtual attendees. For folks in person, lunch is